Hi, I'm Mitch Gallagher. Welcome to the Sweetwater Minute. We have a special guest with us here today. This is Marcelo Vercelli. You are from Chameleon Labs.
I am.
And I'm very pleased to meet you.
Nice to meet you, Mitch.
Thanks for coming in. We appreciate you taking time.
No problem.
So you're here talking to the sales engineers, showing off new products. What's going on?
My favorite town in the Midwest to stop by and visit.
You've been coming here for a lot of years. We were talking
a lot
earlier.
of years. Chuck mentioning that he's known me for 25 years and we're all getting very old.
Right.
So and I just love to see the progress and the changes that are ongoing here at Sweetwater.
Right.
The staff keeps growing, facilities keep growing. Love to talk to the engineers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's awesome to have you here. Of course, Chameleon Labs, we've been partners for a while, and you guys have some great new products and things that are going on. Tell us a little bit about the history of the company. You came on in 2014, is that right?
That's correct.
Yeah, but the company was started in the early 2000s.
Yeah, early 2000s. Chameleon Labs was mostly known as the first clone company, which was kind of a strange moniker to have on it. But I took note because growing up in the industry, growing up being kind of a recording geek, the 1073, the famous 1073 designed by Rupert Neve in the early 70s, is a seminal product in the industry.
Sure.
And young people and guys who are just hobbyists have a hard time kind of shelling out the dough associated with trying to get their hands on one of those devices. But one thing that was never been said about a 1073 has been, boy, I plugged it in and my mic sounded terrible.
Right.
I never have heard that.
Right.
So Chameleon went over the transom and tried to make these products overseas and really kind of hit this crazy price point in the early 2000s. And it was started by two guys in Seattle at a store. Mm-hmm. 2013 came around and I had an opportunity to acquire the company. I still loved very much what they did. But to be honest, the main reason we bought it as a bunch of silly engineers was that the company had very strong distribution and a very strong history. Mm-hmm. And of course, we knew that we had an opportunity to kind of reinvent it. And that's what we've been working on for the last 5 years, is reinventing the brand and spending a lot of time building parts specifically so that the brand can be successful.
Right, and you've pretty much kind of drew the line there, and there was the products prior to you coming in, and now there are the products that are coming out now.
Absolutely. We still get hundreds of phone calls in the course of a year asking us to repair an old product, and we tell the folks, send it in, we repair it for free, we'll send it back to you. Mm-hmm. But take a look at the new stuff.
Right.
And it's those products are so robust, by definition. You have old transistors and transformers. Really hard to break that stuff. It's not uncommon for people to have products of that nature that are 30 years old that are working just fine.
Sure. Yeah. And they were great products, but it seems to me, looking at the way the products have progressed and how you're doing things, you've really tightened the focus on the quality of the components and really tried to dial in on the ideal analog quality. We
looked at that technology per se and said, there's a lot of things that people aren't, taking into consideration when they're trying to use an old classic product in a modern studio. Mm-hmm. Mostly having to do with things that are not of concern, grounding, for example. And those products were drawn up, they were absolutely brilliant, extremely musical. Mm-hmm. And everything that we do is definitely inspired by that in terms of, Rupert choosing frequencies that basically appear as keys on a piano. Right. The musicality associated with the harmonics of the output transformer. These are all brilliant moves. But at the time, you were really limited into the types of parts that you can use, types of technologies available to manufacture those things, and primarily their ability to live in a modern studio is very limited. Number one, noise. Didn't have cell phones back then. Didn't have switch mode power supplies back then. Didn't have PCs in the room. LED displays that all are putting harmonic content into the AC. Right. So it's not also uncommon, and even speaking to the sales engineers, that a lot of the customers are kind of surprised by the noise levels, the noise floor levels. Right. With some of this classic stuff that they buy online, and they make those mention those characteristics. So what we did was kind of started from the ground up. We started, the first thing we ever designed was a power supply, mm-hmm. Something that could work from Japan to Scotland. And we started there, multiple rails, all of the safety in it, but a ton of filtering. In the old days, we all used these toroid power supplies, which were wonderful, but also you needed to have 5 different models in stock, and sometimes it made life hard for the customer because they were waiting for their version to appear in stock. And then we started redesigning the circuits from the ground up. Everything that we do is, like we launch a product and you open it up and inside you see Rev 7.
Right.
And because it probably took 6, 7 revs to get it right. And we're very fortunate, having been around for so long, that we have really good relationships with guys, artists, engineers, that do us the great favor of becoming involved with us at a very early point in the design, where we're talking about feature set, when we're talking about performance, and the feedback that they give us is absolutely seminal to us being able to come to production and come to inventories with products that are stable,
Right.
products that are tested. But for us, the fun part when we were looking at Chameleon was we went to an AES show. And I just came out of my 32nd NAMM show, so I've been to a couple of AES shows.
Yeah, right.
And the AES show has evolved into something very interesting from an engineering perspective. It's kind of half the floor is really high-end digital, and half of it is high-end analog. And you walk around, you look at the analog products, and thank God they're still there. And it was very heartening to me, because you have, it's a technology that has not been abandoned, and has a place in the market, has a place in the studio. But for lots of reasons, it continues to be something that people aspire to because of the cost issue.
Right.
And the cost issue is associated with the fact that most of the guys making analog products are using really high quality components made by third parties. Gray Hill switches in Chicago, Carnhill transformers in the UK, Sauter transformers, Jensen transformers, all amazing components, but they're very expensive. And over the years in my career, we said, well, let's analyze. We look at all of the things that we want to achieve from a feature performance standpoint. What are the investments we need to make for us to take that high-end technology and bring it down to where it can fit into a bill of materials, where it can fit into a final cost to the end user. I just met with about 40 of your sales engineers yesterday, and the biggest surprise I had was, your product's too inexpensive. Just what? Yeah, your product's too inexpensive. Nobody believes it has the performance it has, even though we've taken it out of the library, taken it home, and it works.
Right.
And it's a pretty amazing sounding piece. So I don't know what to, it was like, okay,
Yeah.
this is a great problem to have, and I can explain it away, and here, okay, we get it. We make everything. We make all of the critical components in Woodinville, Washington. I moved there in 1996 from Southern California. I had a company. It was acquired by Mackey Designs, and part of the deal was I had to go be an engineer for Mackey. I was there for about 8 years. So. And one of the neat things about the Northwest in that particular, we have this enclave of crazy audio people. And guys who have lots of decades of experience putting these products together. So it was this opportunity to kind of not put the band back together, but kind of put a new band together with guys with lots of experience.
Right.
So we make a lot of the critical components, the expensive critical components, in the factory. We do all the final assembly, all the final test. People are still scratching their heads how we can do that. But there's also a fair amount of automation, surface mount machinery, surface mount technology. It's a combination of both old and new. And we're starting to expand our product line.
Right.
And we're making these crazy, transformers. And we found a gentleman who was in his late 80s, early 90s. I think he hit about 90 when I met him, who had worked at RCA, who had worked at a company that made the transformers for RCA Labs and for all of their ribbon microphones. He was back in Trenton, New Jersey, and flew back there when we found him. And for example, we spent probably 6 months working from the notes that he gave us as to how to anneal the laminations in our transformers to get the optimal audio performance and the right color.
Right.
All laminations, they have to be a certain color, and they achieve that by changing the amount of oxygen inside the ovens as they were cooling down the laminations. And so we went to extraordinary lengths, fun lengths, crazy certainly by my wife's standards. But we were able to achieve this insanely great, I think, performance out of a product that's not triple the money.
Right.
We hold and have a amazing amount of respect for the companies that have been doing it for 30 or 40 years. But I think our job, from an engineering perspective and kind of like the market and the experience that we've had, is to always try to figure out how to bring the performance of the high-end product down to an affordable price point.
Right.
And I think that's where I think it gets fun. And for us as a challenge, more than anything, is to talk to the young artists that are actually making music today. I always get asked the question, "Oh, you must hate all of the digital stuff." I go, "No, I don't. Actually, it's not a matter of the method; it's a matter of the art." And so I enjoy, along with my family, music that's made in an apartment in Brooklyn on a laptop in a digital little box.
Right.
As well as enjoying, the Viennese Symphony recorded at Sony Classical.
Right.
I think they're both, art is art. The fun part for us is that we have almost now 2 generations of musicians, guys that are in music production that did not grow up with analog. They have no point of reference. And I heard that very clearly yesterday from the sales engineers, that when we start talking to people about analog and what it can do for them, there is no point of reference. They haven't spent a lot of time turning knobs, haven't spent a lot of time getting rid of the 60 hertz hum. So they've been working on platforms that by definition are very, very quiet and lots of features, lots of things that you can do. 16 different compressors I can try. And it's our job to, in terms of being custodians of some of the things that were great in the past, to show them how to put it into that music production chain of theirs that they have today.
Right.
I think the most common application for us is to get a good mic preamp, whether it's ours or anybody else's, and plug it into the line into their Apollo Twin, and with their favorite microphone, and just listen to the difference. Yesterday we had I met a lot of new faces, which I do when I come to Sweetwater on our visits. And one of the young guys asked me, "Why is it so different between, say, an Apollo Twin or an entry-level box and a really nicely designed analog pre?" I said, "Well, let's see." He goes, "My first question, what's it run off of? USB 2.0? You have 5 volts and 1 amp. That's 5 watts. We have 90 to play with, which gives you a huge headroom relative to dynamics, spatiality, all the components that are creating really cool harmonics, inductors, which are kind of think of them as passive compressors for an audio signal. All of this stuff adds up, and the keyword being 1073, that magic that Rupert came up with 45 years ago. We're still trying to capture that somehow.
Right.
And the difference is extraordinary.
Right.
So we're really blessed to be in this position. Chameleon for us is kind of another step in the evolutionary process. And we're working on some really neat new products. We get to work in this wonderful industry, which I've enjoyed since 1987 now. So it's been a lot of fun, Mitch. It really has.
That's awesome. That's incredible. So I'm very interested. You mentioned the importance of the power supply, and you touched on a few different things there. But you really emphasize, I guess, what you call the passive components.
Absolutely.
That are part of the signal path, which would be the transformer or the inductor. And you mentioned, again, you touched on some of those components, but talk about the importance of, like, for example, the different transformers and some of the other passive components.
When you're looking at this design, if you're fortunate enough to work in a high-end studio, you have a number of different options in terms of the type of mic pre you want to use for this particular artist, for this particular application: acoustic guitar, electric guitar, vocal, female vocal, male vocal, etc. The 1073 is an amazing piece of gear in terms of its design, and it used transformers in very specific roles. The input transformer, we have one here, it's inside, first of all, it's inside a mu metal can. So historically, you needed to have transformers because back then we didn't have the electronic circuitry that would allow you to design a circuit that is the optimal relationship, creates the optimal relationship with a microphone. Ribbon microphone, dynamic microphone, condenser microphone. Those are very small signals traveling along those cables. You need to have some sort of gain structure and impedance topology, let's say a circuit topology that creates a friendly, welcoming relationship with that small signal.
Right.
But as soon as it gets into your little box, you want to protect that signal because it's so small. You want to keep it away from parasitic noises. In 1974, the only problem we had was hum in the wall because we had terrible grounding in our homes, and if you see those pictures of guys putting big copper cables in the back of their mixing consoles, right?
Right.
Well, imagine if you were trying to do this at home. Nobody did, but it would be even that much harder.
Right. So
what the job of the input transformer is to create a very quiet, very linear relationship with the microphone.
Okay.
Unfortunately, it takes actually a fair amount of design know-how to how to make these little things. We wind it ourselves. We build the mu metal cans ourselves, everything just so that we can do it at a specific cost structure. But at the end of the day, input transformers have very little effect on overall, say, sound texture or color.
Okay.
It's basically there to be very flat and very friendly. And remember, it's a magnetic relationship. So you have one coil kind of providing signal to the secondary coil, and now you have signal.
So it's sort of an interface between the microphone and the rest
But
of it.
the nice part about it is there's no ground. You lift the ground completely, and now you're able to introduce that signal into your chassis, your system, with no hum, no ground, let's say, any sort of parasitic noise. You're able to lift it.
Okay.
So now you've got the signal in the box. You run to your buffer stages, you create some gain structure, level controls, all that stuff. In your EQ, the inductor, also another coil, a ferrite, so almost like a little transformer, is part of the EQ system. So you're sending relatively hot voltages to it, so 1 volt, actually pretty hot. But the key to the inductor is the fact that the resistance of the inductor changes of level. So hot signal, change in resistance, higher resistance. So it actually starts acting like a passive compressor. And it also creates harmonics, and harmonics by definition create noise. So you can have the cleanest signal in the world going into inductor, but at the output you're going to get not only the cool stuff, the stuff that gives you the color and the texture and the EQ, but you're also going to have higher noise level. And it's funny, in the old days, we were willing to live with the higher level of noise in exchange for that color and texture that we got. And this is the leap that folks on digital platforms are having to make when they start plugging in analog equipment into their digital workflow.
Right.
I can't remember his name, I'm getting old. The curator of the microphone library at Abbey Road, the other day in speaking to him, mentioned the following. He said, I'm still using the U67s that we bought in the 60s. I've been here for 52 years. And he said, I doubt we will ever exceed the quality of the recordings that were made in the 1960s and 70s. I don't see a path to that because of the fact that our equipment, with its noise characteristics, still give you the texture and the definition and all the stuff that the human brain reacts to, musically speaking.
Right.
So again, we tested circuits with and without, and we chose with. There was like no doubt. Even the gals who answer the phone say that one.
Right.
And finally, the output transformers. And again, all of these passive components we make in-house. In terms of color and texture, this is where the magic happens. And it's a combination not only of the transformer, but the circuit that you design around it. We actually run DC current through it, which is kind of unusual because it's what we would call a gapped transformer, which is also another preference by Rupert. And you can get so much of it, but you have to have to get it to work correctly. You really have to investigate and develop the circuit the way you like it, how we drive it. We use a very particular topology, completely different to things that were done in the past, and that's what we add. I suppose if we are not around in the next 20 years, I really feel wonderful about leaving this behind, because it gives you an extraordinary result. But again, we spend an awful lot of time not only working on these, but other passive componentry that allow us to meet a price point.
Right. Sure. And the fact that you're doing it all in-house lets you control everything, be very consistent, and you know exactly what's going into the boxes.
It's super important. We're a small company. We answer the phones.
Right.
Whoever decides to still call us, by the way. Again, this is now analog technology. So we also answer all of the DMs.
There you go.
And I've had to learn what that is. I apologize. But doing it in the United States, doing it, I might live 3 minutes away from my office. There's a big, important characteristic deal. I don't know. We come to work every day and we get to build, equipment used to make art.
That's awesome.
And we feel really blessed and privileged to be able to do that.
Right. So currently you have the 7603.
We have two mic pre's, 7603, and that's a normal, what we call the standard one, where that one uses our transformers, everything, input, output, everything. And we also have a version of that we call XMod, which is a name that the original Chameleon Labs guys came up with. And they actually comes with the Carnhill transformers. So it's the same transformers used in the 1073. It's different.
A little different tone.
It's fun. The guys in the magazines, whom I respect a lot, they used to say, if you can get the British guys to like you, or like your product, you have something.
Right.
So we're very fortunate that the British magazines really like us. But reading and taking apart their reviews and putting both units on a table, saying, when you hear them, they're completely related, but they're also have different levels of mojo. Right. That's his word. Right. So, okay. The output transformer used by Carnhill has a much larger core, and we did that on purpose. We built a small core versus a large core. We could have gone right after it and made it the same, but we didn't. We really wanted to have two flavors. The larger core has lower distortion, below 80 hertz, has better frequency response, maybe a dB, better in the low end, and has a different flavor in the mid-range. And ours, again, a little bit more distortion in the bottom end, but we typically are not using microphones that way. We kind of designed the transformer to work well with the low note on a bass guitar. That's kind of like where we see the roll-off happening. And then we added a little bit more color in the mid-range. So depending on your capsule, depending on your microphone of choice, you're going to get a different result.
Sure. In addition to the two preamps, two rack mount preamps anyway, you also have the new 7721 compressor.
Yeah, we just started delivering that Rev 5 of the new product last month. Chameleon was building a stereo VCA compressor for years. And and I had my troubles with it. Personally, I'm like, I wouldn't have done it that way, But, so we started designing it, and I thought it was going to take a lot less time than it did. And we started delivering it a month ago. It has some great features. I got the same question from one of your engineers yesterday. He says, "Why does it cost half?" And what's inside? Is there anything inside this? Yeah, it took off the cover. Yeah, of course. We have a great relationship with a company that makes the VCAs for us, and we spent an awful lot of time. It's one of the quietest analog products I've ever been involved with. So noise right now is minus 125 dB.
Wow.
Which is getting close to the digital stuff. It's a compressor that, by definition, is called being a bus compressor. Typically, you have multiple mixes going through it, but it is, for that reason, it's not designed to add color. Not something like you would get from like an 1176, where you're just kind of adding crunch and you're trying to do something with a track. This is a wonderfully effective tool for using in stereo busing or even mono busing. A side chain in, peak or RMS detection, soft hard knee, really accurate controls. And that took us about a year.
Right.
Just to figure out how to get the controls not to interact with each other. So what you see is what you set up on the front panel is what you get.
Right.
And we spent an awful lot of time actually on silly things, which to me were important, like the ballistics of the VU meter, getting that correct, useful as a good tool when you're looking at what's going on. So we just started shipping it last month, and the first units are here. So I was really
awesome.
I was so excited to see that.
Yeah, great.
So moving forward.
Yeah, great. You also have a thrust into the 500 series world. You make a couple of chassis, a couple of preamps,
we
and
do.
a pre-EQ. Are there big challenges in taking your philosophy, if you will, and adapting it to 500 series?
Yeah, I love all of our customers, but I really hate the 500 series. Okay, so I told you earlier on when we the first thing we ever decided to do was to design a new power supply, and we designed a power supply with the 500 series chassis in mind. We tried to use the same power supply everywhere, but the 500 series, you make an 8-slot chassis. And depending on the module, it's going to have a huge effect on how much current is required.
Right.
Some of the Class A modules might need 700 milliamps, 500 milliamps, depending on the circuitry. You never know. So what we decided to do is design something that gave you 3 amps and peaked at 5. So we try to limit every slot to 1 amp on a 500 series chassis, but the power supply is such a big deal. The first product that I'm really happy with is the 560, which is literally the equalizer section out of a 1073, and stuffing it into a 500 series chassis, which is this. You have your product, but it takes an awful lot of time, and then you have so many controls that you have to have tiny fingers. Again, something I just drives me nuts. But it's a wonderful system to have when you're trying stuff. And I've seen so many artists over the last few years and engineers that I walk into the studio and there's 6 Pelican cases full of 500 series stuff because they're tracking in hotel rooms, tracking on the bus, tracking on the road. The way the nature of the music industry has changed so dramatically, and the artists need to adapt. And the people around the artists need to adapt, which means they need to be on the road. But there's also a whole other set of challenges. The question, I tried your stuff, but it's really noisy. What happened? We were on the bus, so what kind of inverter do you use on the bus to deal with the problem with the AC? Oh, I don't know. We don't have a filter on the inverter. What's an inverter? Anyway, here's a filter, try that. Oh my gosh, it solved everything.
Right.
So they're challenged.
New challenges,
new challenges all the time, because at the end of the day, they're still trying to find ways to successfully navigate the financial waters. So, anything we can do to help, we try. But yeah, we're introduced. We've had the 560 now for a year. We're really pleased that it's doing so well here at Sweetwater. I always see it on the top 10 list, so it makes us all very happy and proud. We're going to be introducing a new mic pre later this year, and we have two solutions for power chassis. We have a single slot, which is kind of goofy. But
I like that though.
I always had people ask, well, I want to try one module.
Right.
So, okay, well, we made one that takes one module, and then you can daisy chain 6 or 7 more if you need to. In the 500 series, the 880 rack, which is an 8 slot. And that one's sort of the beast.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, absolutely. Well, you guys are really getting into all these different areas, and I just love that approach of the philosophy of having the purest approach to the analog as possible. I think that's very cool, and as you said, I think that makes a big difference when you are working in the digital world to still have that front end and still be bringing in things with those old time-tested kind of equations behind them, if you will.
Yeah, I worked at Mackie for many years, and I had lots of issues with the things that we were doing there from a design standpoint. And Greg was such a wonderful teacher, kind of trying to keep the engineering guys focused on what's important. And he always said, you have to look at it from the perspective of the users and the guys making art and the guys who have nothing, the guys who are trying to put the first dollars together to buy equipment. And it's really important. It's very easy to become a kind of like a analog jerk. This is the only medium for me. And my 5,000 LPs. Right. This is where we live. And you have to kind of not only roll with what the changes in the market are how the changes in the market are affecting the people trying to make the art, but also come up with solutions. And I think as Chameleon, that's what we're really focusing on. It's just saying, okay, there's this wonderful stuff that to a great extent, the major brands, the brands that really are providing gear for the middle of the market have abandoned. It's hard to find engineers that are working inside some of these companies. There's no analog expert in some of these larger companies, where 25 years ago, all their product line was analog.
Right.
So for us, it's both a refuge and an opportunity.
Right.
To kind of like say, okay, how do we bring analog into the digital chain, and where does it make sense? And you really don't need a 32 channel analog 8 bus anymore, unless it has all these other digital interface features. But hey, microphone, mic pre, absolutely.
Sure, still essential.
Absolutely,
Right.
And notice some of the top-selling microphones that are on the Sweetwater website. Pretty well-known entities. Lots of condenser capsules, lots of transformers inside those, lots of tubes inside these microphones.
Right.
So, yeah, absolutely. There's a reason to exist.
Right. Absolutely. Marcelo, thanks for coming in. We appreciate you spending time with us.
Pleasure.
Congrats on all the wonderful things you're doing with the company. We can't wait to see what's happening next.
Appreciate it, Nick.
Real pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And thank you for joining me for the Sweetwater Minute. I'm Mitch Gallagher.